This is Amanda Gooch, eCW trainer. This eCW video will discuss on-site lab workflows. The objectives of this video are to learn how to process patients who are coming in for labs only with no existing orders, patients that are coming in for labs only with existing orders from previous visits, and patients that have orders to be processed in-house. There's a few different ways that you can add a lab or process a patient that is coming in for labs to be drawn. The first way would be patients that are coming into the office for labs only and are not currently on the schedule for today. The first thing that we have to do for those patients is add them to the schedule. In order to do that, you would want to make sure you go to your resource schedule in your navigation band on the left side of your screen. This will bring up your schedule. Make sure that you have the correct schedule selected at the bottom under Resources. Once your patient has arrived for their labs to be drawn, simply go to the time slot that is appropriate and double-click on that time slot. This will open up your appointment window. On this window, you want to make sure that you select the appropriate provider for that patient. And make sure that the resource is your lab schedule. Then you want to go to the Select button next to Patient and find your patient. You click on the patient's name, click OK. That patient's billing alerts and global alerts will populate on the screen for you, and you can close this window. And their name will populate in your appointment screen. Your visit type drop-down, you want to select the lab only option. And since they have arrived at your office, you want to make sure you change your status to arrived. In your reason field, you can simply type labs or labs only. And then you would click OK. Now this appointment has been made for your patient. If you go to your S Jelly Bean, this will bring you to your office visit schedule. And as you can see on this screen, I have selected the lab schedule and the provider's schedule. And you can see that our test patient, Catwoman, has shown up on our office visit schedule, and she has arrived. Once she's on our office visit schedule, we want to make sure that we check her in and designate her to the lab. In order to do this, I would click the Check In and Out button at the bottom of the screen, click the check-in box, notate that she is currently in the lab, and change our status to blood draw. As you can tell, also on our status, we can also select immunization or injection needed. So in this case, you would just add whatever status is appropriate for you. You click OK, and you can see that the patient has arrived with us. She's in the lab, and she's in the lab status. We will double-click on the patient's name to access her progress note. Once we are in the progress note, we will click on the hyperlink labeled Treatment. And then we'll click on Labs. Once we have the lab screen open, we can add whatever labs might be appropriate for this patient to have drawn today. The first thing that we want to do is make sure that we have an assessment or a diagnosis associated with the labs that are being drawn today. We can do this by clicking either Add or Previous Diagnosis under the Assessments header. If I click on Previous Diagnosis, this will bring up her previous diagnoses and her problem list. We can select from either of these categories. For this example, we'll just select one of the diagnoses and click OK. As you can see, that diagnosis has populated under the Assessments header. I can click the checkbox next to the diagnosis, and then we will go up to the lookup bar and type in the labs that we need to have drawn for the patient. Once we have those populated, you'll see that the search selection has changed. And one important note is to make sure that you are populating orders under future orders, unless the patient is coming in today to have the labs drawn with you, in which case it is okay for you to add to today's orders. Since the patient is arriving to have their labs drawn with us, we are just going to populate it in today's orders. I'll select the lab that I wish to add, and I can add multiple in this case, and they'll populate under today's orders header. Once those are under today's orders, I will click the Quick Transmit button. This window will bring up a list of your labs in this window that is currently blank. Your production environment will have the labs listed here. I will click the checkboxes next to the labs that I'm drawing today for the patient. I'll click the checkbox for today's collection date. The Assign To dropdown will bring up different labs. In this case, I can select Orchard Lab. And then I would specify the lab that's appropriate under Select Lab. Your labs will populate in the production environment in this field. One suggestion from Central Lab is that once you're in the Transmit Labs window, that you select your lab from this drop-down menu first. The reason for this is that once you select your labs and then select the lab from this drop-down menu, oftentimes it will deselect the labs that you previously checked. The next step is important to know that we do not ever click the Transmit button when we are on-site lab technicians. We will only click this green arrow next to the Transmit button and click Print Only. Once you click Print Only, your print dialog box will populate and you will choose the printer that you want to print your requisition from. Once you have printed your requisition, we can exit out of these windows. I can go back to my office visit screen, and I can check our test patient out. To do this, I would go to Check In and Out again at the bottom of the screen, click the checkbox for checkout, and click OK. This signifies to the front desk that we are done with this patient and that they can be checked out from the site. While we are still on the office visit screen, we will need to reassign this appointment to a provider in order for this note to be locked at the end of the day. As you can see, it is currently unlocked, and we can tell that by looking at the lock at the left side of the appointment. In order to reassign this appointment to a provider, I would click the green arrow next to View Progress Notes and go to the top option which reads Change Appointment Provider Resource. Currently, this patient is on the Lab Oak resource, so I would need to reassign this resource to the provider who is going to lock the note. In this case, and in most cases, you will make sure that the option matches the provider option. Once we have selected the appropriate resource, we'll click OK. This person, as you can tell, has moved from the lab resource to Dr. Engelman's schedule. Now this patient can be checked out from the site. If you are at a site where your lab-only patients do not stop at the front desk before they check out, you can check the patient out as the lab technician. In order to do this, you would simply return to your resource schedule, find your patient on the appropriate schedule. We've now moved this patient over to Dr. Engelman's schedule. So we will double-click on her appointment, acknowledge her alerts, and we will change the visit status to checked out. Once we've done this, we can click OK on the appointment screen, and this patient has been checked out for today. An important item to note in this case is if the patient's orders were originally submitted in MedInformatics, you must also print a requisition from MedInformatics to accompany with your specimen. When doing this, please make sure that after you print the requisition, as you normally would from MedInformatics, you need to reset the status of your labs in MedInformatics from on hold to new. This ensures that the central lab does not think that the labs are being submitted via MedInformatics. Another way to process a patient with labs are patients with lab orders that are submitted in eCW by a provider during their visit with the provider. In order to view this example, we will go back to our office visit screen. In this case, we will use errand test as our example. If we double-click on the patient's name, we can access errand test's progress note. If we scroll down on the progress note, we can see that the provider has ordered a CBC and a TSH for the diagnosis of diabetes. In order to process this patient's labs, we'll simply click on the treatment hyperlink, click on Labs, and our Manage Orders screen populates. We can see that our CBC and our TSH has been ordered as a future order on the right bottom of our screen. If we click on the Future Orders header, we can access that section of the chart. In order to move these orders over to today for us to draw for the patient, all we have to do is click the blue arrow next to each lab that we are going to process. So we will click on the blue arrow for TSH and CBC. And as you can see, that has moved our orders over to today's orders. From here, it is the same process that we followed previously. So we will click on Quick Transmit. The CBC and the TSH will populate in this top area. We will click the checkbox next to both of those labs, click Today as our collection date, select the appropriate lab in the Assign To field, select the appropriate lab in the Select Lab field, and again, we will not click Transmit, but we will click the green arrow next to Transmit and click Print Only to print our requisition. Once our requisition has been printed, we can process the lab with the patient, exit out of these windows, and return to our office visit screen by clicking the Yes Jelly button. Another way to process labs for a patient are patients with lab orders that need to be resulted in-house. For example, tests such as strep, influenza, pregnancy tests, etc. In this case, we will be using our patient Kathy test. If we are in our office visit screen, we can double-click on our patient's name to access her progress note. As we can see scrolling down on the progress note, our provider has already ordered a urinalysis for the diagnosis of urinary tract infection. Because this is a lab that we process in-house, all we do in this case is click on the hyperlink that reads Urinalysis Routine, and this will bring up our lab's result window. The first thing that we'll do once we have ran the test for this patient is click on Results Received checkbox in the middle of our screen here. Ensure that today's date is populated in the date field, and if it is a negative or positive result, we can use the drop-down menu to designate those results here. In the case of a urinalysis where you don't have a single word to identify a result with, you would use the yellow highlighted fields. In this case, we can start with urine color and enter appropriate results for each field in the yellow boxes. You'll go ahead and populate each field appropriately, and if necessary, you can add a note by clicking Add Notes and clicking OK. This timestamps our note and will populate on the progress note that the test has been completed. Once we have populated our results and added any appropriate notes, we want to make sure that we assign these lab results to the appropriate provider for them to review. In order to do this, we would click on the blue ellipses next to the Assign To field at the top of the window and select your provider. Once you have found your provider's name, you will click OK. And once we click OK at the bottom of this window, we will notice that our note has been populated that the test has been completed and that lab result has been sent to that provider's L jelly bean up at the top for them to review. In your production environment, the results of the urinalysis will populate on the progress note itself as well. This way, the provider can simply view the progress note for the results for quick care of the patient and at a later time review the results via their L jelly bean. If the order is not already submitted by the provider, you will need to add the order with the proper diagnosis as previously shown in the other examples. This concludes the eCW training video of the on-site lab workflow. Please forward all questions or suggestions to our email at ecwtrainingquestions@palmettoprimarycare.com. Thank you.